Hey you guys, we're doing another Flickers of Fear show today. This is my movie review show. Now, interestingly, the movie that I'm going to be talking about today was not the movie that I was originally going to be talking about today, but this is how it happened. So this movie, which is called X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes, and it came out in 1963, I had actually been meaning to watch this movie since way back in the 1980s when Stephen King talked about it in his book Danse Macabre, which, if you haven't read, it's nonfiction, and it came out in the early 1980s, and he talks all about horror in literature, movies, TV, pretty much every format you want to imagine, between 1950 and 1980. And he talked quite a bit about The Man with the X-Ray Eyes, and I had actually never seen it. So I was scrolling through Tubi a few days ago, and I saw that they had just added it and that you could watch it for free. I believe you can also watch it for free on YouTube, although I'm not entirely sure about that. But as of this recording, you can watch it for free on Tubi. So I decided I was going to go ahead and pull the trigger on it instead of doing the movie that I was originally going to do, because I've just always wanted to see it, because like the way he talked about it sounded really cool. And I will say that I'm really, really glad I watched this. Now, don't go into this expecting like some big lost masterpiece or anything like that, but that said, this was actually a really good and surprisingly effective little sci-fi horror thriller, and it was written and directed by Roger Corman, of all people, who, like I said, I feel like people, when you'd say, oh, it's a Roger Corman movie, yes, he did make a lot of bad movies, but he was a businessman. He was very successful. He actually did care about his movies, and you know, he not only made some decent movies in there, like all his Poe adaptations, which I think are fantastic, but he also gave a lot of very famous filmmakers, Francis Ford Coppola, for example, their start in film. He also gave Jack Nicholson, I believe, his first acting role. So he's kind of like a little bit of a star maker, kind of, even though his movies are kind of seen as maybe schlocky, and some of them are, but this one, not so much. I think this one had some kind of schlocky aspects to it, but the thing that I liked about this one is that the implications of it, if you think about it, are really, really horrifying, right? So like I said, this movie, which is sometimes just called X, sometimes it's called X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes, it stars Ray Milland, and as I mentioned, it came out in 1963. Now, when it was originally released, I think it was released as like the second part of a double bill with Francis Ford Coppola's first film, which was Dementia 13, which I'll do a review of that one day too, because I really, really dig that movie. This one, for some reason, I always perceived that this one was black and white, maybe because Dementia 13 is, but this is not black and white. It's Technicolor. So I don't know where I got that idea. Maybe it's just because in the Stephen King book that, you know, I had the paperback and it was all black and white pictures, and I think he had a picture from this movie and it was black and white, so maybe that's, I don't know why I perceived that, but it's in color. So Ray Milland plays a character named Dr. Xavier. No, they did not get it from the X-Men, because I think the X-Men comic didn't come out until later the same year that this movie came out. So they weren't like copying or anything like that. Now, I'm not entirely sure like what kind of doctor he is, but he's just like a general practitioner, I suppose. But he's also doing like some research on the side, and he has become really obsessed with human vision and how it's really not all that good, actually. Like, we can only say this in the movie. I don't know, this is not entirely accurate, but he says in the movie, it's, you know, humans can only see like 10% of the visible spectrum. At the beginning of the movie, he has been getting some funding from this foundation, and he's developed this serum, which he very creatively calls X, which they're essentially eye drops. And when you put the drops in your eyes, it kind of gives you the ability to see through shit. What good would this be, you might be asking? But his kind of thing, because he's a doctor, he thinks it would be good if doctors could see through their patients, so you could see what was the matter with them, like inside. And he does actually use that ability like later on in the movie. So he's working on it, and he's sort of frustrated a little bit because he's getting like some blowback from the foundation that's, giving him the money to fund the research. In particular, this one doctor, Dr. Fairfax, and she is kind of like the overseer of his project. So she's kind of always, she really actually likes him and thinks his work is interesting. And they kind of have a little bit of a romantic thing going on too. Like, not overtly, but it's kind of like a little flirtation or whatever. But she's sort of, she's the person at the foundation that has to come and make sure that, he's doing the research and are they still going to fund it and blah, blah. So he's been working on the shit and he's like, the stuff works, but so far he's only been able to experiment on animals. And there is one scene in there where they take like a monkey, which is a real monkey, and drop some stuff in its eyes, or at least attempt to, because the monkey's just like, dude, what are you doing? Knock it off. So the experiment, he's done this on the experiment on the monkey, and apparently the monkey is developing the ability to see through. He has like these 3 different colored like sheets of paper or cardboard or something. And he's like, I'm going to put the white one in the front and you can't see the other ones. And the monkey knows to turn on the colored light that corresponds to the colored sheet that he sees in front of him. So he turns on the white one, which is the one in the foreground, but then he turns on the other 2, like the red one and the blue one. And he's like, oh, and that means that he can see through the white one and he sees the other 2 colors as well. So he's really into this. And, he kind of explains to Dr. Fairfax, like what the applications of it would be. Like I said, particularly he wants it for medical research so he can see into patients' bodies so he can help people. And she's kind of jazzed about it too. But the foundation, not so much. They don't really see any value in it. And basically they're going to cut off his funding. And there's all this other kind of like fucking shit about it. So he decides that experimenting on animals isn't going to cut it. So he's going to experiment on himself in the tradition of mad scientists throughout history. So he starts dripping stuff into his own eyes. Now, at first, it seems kind of awesome. Like he can see through pieces of paper to pieces of paper underneath, so he's like, hey, I can read that underneath. And they're like, wow, that's pretty neat. And then there's a thing where one of his fellow doctors has diagnosed this one little girl with, I can't remember what it was, but it was like something to do with her heart or her lungs or something. And he was going to do surgery on her the next morning. But then Dr. Xavier goes in there and he's just like, oh shit, like he misdiagnosed her. And if he does what he's going to do at the surgery tomorrow, she's going to die because he's going to be cutting in the wrong place. There's a whole thing like that. So he kind of gets into trouble with the medical establishment, even though he turns out he's right, that he's kind of like usurping other doctors, diagnoses, like stepping on their dicks, essentially. So there's that. And there's also kind of an amusing scene sort of early on where he goes to a party with Dr. Fairfax, because like I said, they have a little flirty thing going on, and he sees everybody at the party naked. So that's like, it's kind of like played goofy, but it's like, it's so funny because Ray Milland is like the whitest motherfucker in the world. And it's like, he goes out to dance like at this party. And it's just like, I don't even know if there's a name for the dance that he does. And it's just like, it's funny because all the people at the dance, I guess they were trying to do like a modified twist sort of dance, which I guess was like kind of popular at the time. But these people are all kind of like older because they're all like doctors and academics and stuff. So they're not like teenagers. So I think it would look less ridiculous if it was like a party full of teenagers doing that stupid dance. But the fact that it's kind of all these middle-aged fuddy-duddies just makes it like way funnier. And it's like, and as awkward as everyone's dancing is at this party, Ray Milland's dancing is like 1,000 times more awkward, and it's just a joy to watch. So I just thought I would put that in there. This isn't like a funny movie, but that scene is like totally funny, where he starts seeing through everybody's clothes. Obviously, they don't show anybody naked, but they do kind of like show, bare legs and, people's from their shoulders, and it looks like they're naked, and everybody's just kind of twisting around. The funny thing to me, too, is that Dr. Fairfax, who knows what he's been up to and knows that he's taken the eye drops, right? And she, like, twigs onto the fact that he's like, oh, you're looking at me naked right now. And she doesn't seem like offended. She's just kind of like, oh, you know what I mean? It's like really, really funny. The whole scene is like really funny. Like I said, it's not a comedy, but there is like some funny shit in it. So as I said, he gets in trouble with the medical establishment for what he does is like during the surgery on the little girl, where, like I said, the initial surgeon like misdiagnosed, and he's like, you're going to cut in the wrong place. So basically what he does is he snatches the scalpel away from the other surgeon and like cuts his hand, and he's like, there, fuck you, you can't do it now, and I'm gonna do it. And like I said, even though he turns out to be right, like the other doctor is like super pissed off, and so he's like, oh, you're gonna get sued for malpractice and blah blah blah. So at this point, he's kind of on the outs a little bit. He's lost his funding for his research, and he only has so much of the serum left. And it seems that he's sort of become obsessed, too, with taking more of it. I think there's an implication. I was watching another review of it, and they said they didn't really understand why he would keep taking it, because as the movie goes on, it's almost kind of like, it's like a Jekyll and Hyde situation where it's kind of like he puts it in his eyes and he can see through stuff. It's not, I don't think it's constant, but it kind of comes and goes. And then like the more of it he takes and the longer the movie goes on, like the more shit he can see through. Like he can start seeing into people's bodies, like I said, and then he starts seeing, kind of, you're led to believe like sort of through, like he sees all the invisible light spectrums and he starts seeing maybe toward like beyond the bounds of the universe type stuff, you know, which they get into a little bit later. So it does kind of go in a little bit of a cosmic horror direction, surprisingly. But so there's that, but he still keeps taking the drops anyway. And but I think the implication is that, you know, because your eyeballs are, you know, attached to your brain, obviously. So I think maybe that the drops are maybe affecting his brain, or, you know, his thinking pattern as well. And it's almost kind of like an addictive thing too, because he's almost kind of like, it gets to a point where he can't really sleep anymore, because even when he closes his eyes, obviously he can see through his eyelids, which is like horrible. So he just sees light all the time. He can't have dark. So as the movie goes on, like after he gets sort of in trouble and, you know, has to sort of, there's a point too where he gets into a fight with the surgeon, you know, and he accidentally sort of like pushes him out a window. Like he doesn't push him out a window, but he kind of knocks him out a window. And because he'd been acting sort of crazy, you know, Dr. Fairfax is like, no one's going to believe that was an accident, you know, even though it was an accident. So you need to get the fuck out of Dodge. So he has to pretty much like take off. And from that point, he has to start wearing these like super, super dark glasses. Now it's really weird because like the first half of the movie is him just getting more and more, like taking more of the drops and being able to see more and more. He's essentially like, you know, he could see into people's bodies and see through things and all this other stuff, but not all the time. It's like really, you know, intermittent, I guess. So after the dude falls out the window and dies, he takes off. And that's like, so that's like the first half of the movie. Then we kind of hard cut to him being in a carnival. And he is I guess he's trying to keep stuff on the DL, and he's like taken on the name Mr. Mentalo, I think is his name. He's like, you know, magic mind or whatever. And because he can see through everybody's shit, like he can see into your pockets, he can see into, so he can like figures out your name, how much money you've got. So he has like a whole act going. Interestingly, the guy that, I don't know if he runs the carnival, but he's sort of like the guy that's managing Ray Milland's character, is played by Don Rickles, which I think was maybe, for you youngsters, he was like a really famous comedian back in the day. This is a straight role. He's not like funny in it. He does kind of make some funny quips here and there, but it's a largely serious role, and it's largely like he's kind of a villain a little bit. Not so much a villain, just kind of like he just wants to make money, right? So Ray Milland's character, Dr. Xavier, who's going under Mr. Mentalo, there's kind of a thing where he's dressed up in this like ridiculous looking, you know, woo-woo kind of robe, and he has this thing around his eyes that has like a big huge eyeball on it, and he can see through it obviously, and he can see through everybody. And so he has an act, and a lot of people just think he's like, it's a trick or he's faking, as you would. But Don Rickles' character actually does believe that he can do what he actually says he can do. And so he has the idea, like, to make some money. He's like, we should set up essentially like a free clinic, and all these people will come by and you can tell people what's really wrong with them because you can actually see inside of their bodies, and then we'll like, you know, tell them what's wrong. They can go to a doctor, and then, you know, we'll say it's free, but they'll give us donations anyway, and we'll like make bank. So that is actually what they end up doing. They don't really like each other, like, you know, Ray Milland, and he's getting more and more crazy because, as I said, the more the drops take effect on him, you know, whether it's affecting his brain or whatever, but he's starting to see more and more. And in a lot of the film, you kind of see things from his point of view. I mean, you have to think this movie was like very, very cheap. It's very low budget. It only cost $300,000 to make, I think, and it only took 3 weeks to shoot it. That said, I think it's actually kind of cool the way they show stuff from his perspective. It's basically just, when you see things from his perspective, everything is just kind of like blurred and like rainbowy and prismy and shit like that. So it's trying to show that the longer the movie goes on, he's just starting to see things that are like outside the ken of like maybe things in like other dimensions and stuff like that. And it's kind of driving him crazy. Like I said, I don't think they spell that out entirely, but I'm pretty sure that that's what the implication was. So they set up this clinic, and he has these people come, and it's just kind of like this real ramshackle operation, and people come in there and he's like, yeah, you know, you have, you know, lung cancer or whatever. And then he starts, you know, getting all these donations, and so they start making all this money. Then it turns out that Dr. Fairfax, because I think like a month has gone by, like they don't really say until later on, because like I said, it's a pretty hard cut, like in the middle where he's just suddenly set up at a carnival now. But Dr. Fairfax she said, I spent a month tracking you down and I found you. So I'm not really sure if she wants him to come back because like he's still in trouble and shit like that. But I think maybe the implication being like she's in love with him and she wants to like help him, you know, a fresh start or whatever. So when she turns up, he decides, hey, I don't want to do this thing with Don Rickles anymore. And so then he's like, I need more money. I need more money for my research. I'm almost out of serum. It's like I said, it's really strange that even though it's clear that this serum is driving him crazy, he still wants to make more of it and he still wants to go farther. But like I said, I think the implication being that one, he's addicted to the shit, or two, it's like started to affect his brain. I guess that's an and/or. So he gets the idea that he's like, I know where we can get money to continue my research. We're going to go to Vegas, baby. And because he's going to be able to see through all the cards. He can see through everybody else's cards. He can see through all the dealers. So it's like, you know, he can even see into like the slot machines. So he knows like when it's going to hit and all this other kind of stuff, which I wasn't entirely sure how that works, but I guess, okay, whatever. So they go to Vegas and, you know, and obviously he starts like making all this money. And see, this is where I think that it's implied that he's kind of not really thinking shit through anymore, because if you actually could see through shit, right, and you decided, as you would, to go to Vegas and win a bunch of money, you would think you'd want to keep kind of, you know, low key about it. Because I don't know if you guys know, but when you go to casinos, if you go to a casino and you start winning a whole bunch, they're going to watch out and they're going to think you're cheating somehow, and you're not going to get away with it because they keep an eye on all that crap. Because, you know, people know how to count cards and shit like that. But he's very kind of like, hey, yeah, bitch, yeah, man, I can see you've got this and you've got that. And I was like, yeah, you're gonna be, it's like, yeah, the mafia's gonna break your fucking kneecaps. Just shut up and take the money. But he ends up getting like $20,000 or whatever. But like I said, you know, the casino people are just kind of like, what the fuck's he up to? He's, you know, cheating. So they kick him out. He's just like, fuck this, and throws all the money everywhere. And then he just basically takes off. You know, he gets away from Dr. Fairfax and he's just like fucking lost it. He goes off in the car and drives through the desert. And obviously he shouldn't really be driving because all he can see is like this ever shifting patterns of prismatic light. And it should be noted too that there's one great scene, because like I said, the second half of the movie, he's wearing those really, really dark sunglasses the whole time. So you don't know what the fuck's going on behind there, like with his eyeballs and whatnot. So at some point he whips somebody takes the sunglasses off, and his eyes are like, the whites of them are all black, but then like the middle part is gold, like shiny gold. And I will say this was 1963, this movie was made. They didn't have, you know, little contact lenses like we have now. They're just made of like bendy plastic or whatever. So if you see people wearing contact lenses in movies prior to, I'm not really sure when the crossover was, but prior to like the 70s maybe, or maybe even the 80s, then they were made of thick glass, which you can tell these probably were, and they would kill your eyes. You could only wear them for like a minute or two before your eyes would just start watering everywhere. So the fact that Rainbow Land went the distance and was like, yeah, I'll wear these fucking things, because they look really good. It looks like really creepy. I mean, for 1963, it's obviously, they would do it with CGI nowadays probably, or with just like little bendy contact lenses. But back then, there's big, thick fucking contact lenses. So it's these black eyes with this gold in the middle. And everybody's like, what the fuck? That is like crazy looking. So like I said, he takes off from the casino and he's driving around. He can't really see anything because he sees through everything, which like I said, would be fucking horrifying. You wouldn't be able to drive. You wouldn't be able to do anything. And it's like, and he's gotten to a point too, where he's just like, he looks up at the ceiling. Cause like I said, he can't sleep because he can see through his eyelids, and he looks up through the ceiling, and if he's like in a building and he can see everybody like up through up through the fucking building, like all the way to the top. And I'm like, that would be like fucking horrific. That's what I meant about the idea for this being like really, really horrible. Like if you thought it through, because I was like, yeah, you would not want this shit. So he is taken off. He's driving all over the fucking road because he can't really see. And then he crashes. And then he lives, but he gets out and he kind of stumbles into this tent revival. And at which point, like, you see his face, and now his eyes are just completely black. And he gives this speech, and it's so funny because I didn't realize that this speech that he gives, like this monologue where he's telling the preacher, like, what he's like, I want to tell you what I can see. And he's basically implying that he can see into other dimensions, or he can see like the center of the universe. And if you guys know, there was a cover of Black Sabbath's Supernaut that was done, I don't remember what year it was, in the 80s or 90s, done by 1,000 Homo DJs, which was a Ministry side band. And they, in a couple of the mixes of that song, they put pretty much this whole monologue in there. Like, I want to tell you what I can see. It's like, I see great darknesses and all this other stuff. So it's like, as soon as I heard that in the movie, I just like lost my shit because I was like, oh my God, Supernaut. It was just really, really funny, really, really funny moment because I knew it was a sample from a movie, but I didn't realize it was from this movie. So fun fact, if you look that song up, all the stuff in the middle about, in the center of the universe, the eye, you know what I mean? That's all from this movie. So that's what he's telling them at the end. Now, he's trying to tell them all of this, but then, of course, the preacher is just kind of like, no, you just see sin and the devil. And you know what they say in the Bible, if thine eye offends thee, pluck it out. And so he's like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And then he puts his eyes like that. He puts his hands like that, and he goes out of frame. And then he comes back up, and there's a still shot. And like I said, there's a still shot, and it's very, very brief, where they're trying to imply that he tore his own eyeballs out. But obviously in 1963, you couldn't really show that. And with the budget that this movie was shot on, they couldn't really show that either. So it's basically just a still photo of Ray Milland with like the eyes cut out of the photo, and then there's like red light behind it. It doesn't look all that great by today's standards, obviously, but it was 1963. They did the best they could with the budget that they had, and to their credit, to Roger Corman's credit, he didn't linger on it. He just kind of showed it for a second, like implying that he tore his eyes out, and that's pretty much the end of the movie. Now, Roger Corman, I think, wrote the screenplay for this, although I think the screenplay is credited to Ray Russell and somebody else. Ray Russell was like actually quite a well-known, short story, like a horror writer at the time, and he wrote some sci-fi as well. I think he wrote Sardonicus, if I'm not mistaken, although I could be wrong about that. If somebody wants to correct me in the comments, I'm sure someone will. But the funny thing about this, when I first read about this movie in Stephen King's Danse Macabre, he made the observation, and keep in mind that when Stephen King wrote this, you couldn't, and this is like so funny, like younger people are gonna like freak out, but you couldn't just go back and watch a movie. So he was just going by his memory of it. And he said that, he's like, oh, the rumor was when this movie came out that there was actually another scene after the end scene, like after he had torn his eyes out, and that there was another couple seconds in the movie that they had cut out because it was too horrifying. And he's like, that last couple seconds was Ray Milland saying, I can still see, even though his eyes were gone, which would have been a rad fucking ending. So somebody asked Roger Corman about that, and he's like, is that true? Like, did they take that out? And he's like, no, it's not true. He's like, but now I'm I'm paraphrasing, but he said, now I'm kind of pissed because like Stephen King said that in the book, and he's like, that was a better ending than mine. So it's like, so he would have done it if he'd thought of it, but I guess he didn't. But that actually would have been really cool. Now, I read not too long ago, or maybe it was a few years ago, I thought that Tim Burton was going to do a remake of this, which actually I think this would be a decent movie to remake. Even though the one from 1963 is really good and like surprisingly effective for being as old as it is, I think this would be kind of cool with like a modern sort of flair to it. Because like I said, it almost has a little bit of a cosmic horror kind of thing, because just not so much overtly, but it's just kind of like in the implications of it, that if you could actually see everything, and you could see like all the visible spectrum, you could see all the invisible spectrum, and then you would start seeing through everything. And like I said, you could even see into other dimensions and stuff. There's definitely a Lovecraftian kind of aspect to that. And I think that would make a really good film with like maybe like a larger budget and a more modern sensibility. And I think that would actually be really good. So in that case, even though I really, really liked this movie, I wouldn't be averse to seeing a modern remake of it because I think it's a great idea. And, it's just it would be a horrifying movie if done correctly. I meant to mention too that like when I was talking about Supernaut, that Bauhaus on their 1981 album Mask also they have a song called The Man with the X-Ray Eyes, which is they're kind of talking about this movie, I guess. Like their lyrics are kind of abstract, but they kind of could be talking about this movie. Sure, why not? But yeah, if you're into 60s horror, if you like Roger Corman movies, if you like that era of sci-fi, then this is one that I would definitely recommend. This is definitely one of the better Roger Corman movies that I've seen for sure. And definitely one of the better like 60s sci-fi films, just because the idea of it is so horrifying. It's got like some weird tonal shit in there. Cause like I said, the scene with them at the party with the really awkward dancing and all the naked people and stuff, it was like there was kind of funny, goofy stuff in there. But on the whole, it's like pretty serious, and it's kind of like a fucked up idea, and it kind of went farther, a little bit ahead of its time, I feel like, just concept wise. But yeah, if you want to watch it, I would recommend it. Like I said, particularly if you like that era of sci-fi. It's on Tubi at the moment for free. You might also be able to watch it on YouTube for free. Kind of forgotten even in Roger Corman circles. I don't really see that many people talking about it, but I was really happy that I finally got to see it because I just remembered Stephen King talking about it so long ago, and I finally got around to watching it, and I'm glad I did because I really dug it quite a bit. So that'll do it for this Flickers of Fear. I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.